welcome to, I think this is our fourth now live workshop for a Quantum Business Show. And I'd like to welcome Kate Baucherel, who's going to be talking to us about blockchain technologies, how they're helping companies to stay competitive in a world where consumers demand proof of ethical, sustainable supply chains. Find out what makes blockchain special and how businesses from car manufacturers to farmers are using it to build trust and save money. So I'd like to hand you over to Kate now.
Fantastic. Thank you very much indeed, Scott. You've actually recited one of my slides for me, which is a really good thing, that we can jump through that one. This is good. So as Scott said, my name's Kate Baucherel. I'm a digital strategist specializing in blockchain, cryptocurrency, distributed ledgers. I've had a long career in both finance and technology. I'm a chartered management accountant, which means that I look at the problems of business through the lens of that experience across multiple sectors and my professional training. But I love the technical side of things, and blockchain just grabbed me as soon as it came along, because I know a ledger when I see one, and this is really what blockchain is. So I'm going to share my screen because I've got a few slides, and it will help to just get things into the head. So here we go. Share that. Hopefully you can all see those slides now, that elegant picture. And as Scott said, we're looking at what makes blockchain special and how people are already using it in the real world. And I want to also look at how that's going to impact businesses all the way through the supply chain, because I know most of the people I'm talking to today are not going to go off and build a blockchain. You don't need to, but you will probably be involved in systems that use blockchain technology. So understanding the power of that is really, really important. A little bit of housekeeping. Got you muted by default because you just want to avoid any background noise. If you've got any questions during the presentation, and I know this is an unfamiliar topic for a lot of people, if I start saying things that you find complex, then jump in, ask a question, and I will try to clear up any queries. And we do have some time at the end just for general quick Q&A as well. It's being recorded, obviously, and you'll be able to pick up later on catch up as well. And if you are watching on demand, then hello, nice to see you. And that QR code will take you through to how to reach me on Twitter and LinkedIn and so on and so forth. So moving on, I have a couple of questions for you. I know there's only a few of you here in the live session, but what I would like to ask you is this couple of questions. I want to know, what is your current level of understanding of blockchain and crypto, and where do you feel you need to be with that understanding? It's always useful to know. Brilliant. Couple of answers coming in. Good. Good. That's fantastic. Now, it's really good to see that there's a need for that awareness, and I really hope that I can help to build that today. Fantastic. I'm going to end that poll now, and we will move on. Okay, just share those results for everyone so you can see. So we're going to start off and see why blockchain is important at the moment. And I imagine you've all come across the Gartner hype curve in the past. So the Gartner hype curve gives us an idea of where industries are in terms of the development of technology and innovation. And blockchain actually now has its own hype cycle all to itself. And we can see here, I know it's a small resolution, but you get the idea, that blockchain has gone past that hype peak. We've gone through the it's a silver bullet that's going to solve all of the problems of borders and identity and so on, and it's starting to reach what we call the plateau, or the slope of enlightenment, and the plateau of productivity starting to come through and find its niche in the whole technology stack that industries are using. And gradually we're seeing development on blockchain. Yes, it's all coming up towards hype, but these things include tokenization, which is at peak hype at the moment with artworks and so on, data security, Internet of Things, zero knowledge proofs, decentralized applications, and provenance are all important. So these are the kind of things that every business will be using blockchain in some way or another within the technology stack to manage these aspects, because it is quite an extraordinary technology. And we're particularly interested here about how it affects the competitiveness of business and the way we meet what consumers want. There was a survey done by Deloitte in March, and they looked at what consumers want in terms of sourcing products, clarity on the origins, and we can see nearly half of the people they surveyed wanted to know more about the origins of the products. A third were choosing brands already that could show they had sustainable practices and ethical values, and some had stopped using brands because they were concerned about those aspects as well. And blockchain gives us a window onto sustainability and ethical practice and the origins and sourcing of products, and this is why it's so important for supply chains. But let's step back a little bit and see where it came from. It was quite a long journey from the crypto anarchists to the crypto kitties to the digital cats. And it all started off with the idea of, believe it or not, what would happen if there was no government and we had to still pay each other and contract? How would we manage payments, currencies, contracts without a central authority that we trusted? And so this was the whole crypto anarchist movement. And there are cryptographers going back to the 70s and 80s, Ralph Merkle, David Choum in particular, whose work helped to gradually evolve this area of peer-to-peer trusted contracting. We get things like PayPal emerged from all of this development. Our own bank cards emerged from all of this development. But what we finally got was Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system, published, coincidentally, I think not, in the middle of the financial crisis, when trust in banks and confidence in the private money that's held in banks was at an absolute all-time low. And up pops Bitcoin as a potential solution. And the way that that Bitcoin was designed gave us something incredibly important that we've taken through into business. What it gave us was a ledger of record. It gave us an honest ledger, a transparent, time-stamped audit trail of transactions that had been validated and confirmed and put into this chain, literally a chain of blocks. This is just a screenshot from the Etherscan, from the Ethereum blockchain. And here's all the little blocks, each with, a few hundred transactions in them. And we can go back and we can see the exact detail of all the transactions that happened. Data that's sitting on the blockchain is there to stay. So we have accountability and responsibility and trust that emerges from that. We can see the automation. So we can actually go into a transaction and see what is the process automation that is behind that transaction. Everybody who's involved in a blockchain system, you have multiple parties, can derive some benefit from it because of that transparency and trust. And we're seeing all sorts of things like data for audit and reporting and so on. I've literally just been playing around doing crypto taxes and looking at all the little transactions backwards and forwards when I've bought artworks and so on. And all of that is recorded. I can see the date, the time down to the second when things happened, and I can see what the transactions were, and I can interpret them correctly for reporting. So there's a huge amount of power in the information that's held in the blockchain. Obviously, there is an elephant in the room, which is very, very high profile at the moment, which is the environmental side. Bitcoin was the very first proof of concept, if you like, of this type of technology, and as a result it is very clunky. It is causing all sorts of problems around the environmental side, but there's an awful lot of work going on. So the Bitcoin Mining Council is looking at disclosure for green mining, for renewable sources. We've coincidentally managed to lose a lot of the Chinese miners recently who were heading off to the coal-fired power stations when the hydroelectric ones ran out in the dry seasons. And newer crypto is not using the same kind of system. And those that are maturing and changing are moving away from mining. So we have the Bitcoin Mining Council, the Crypto Climate Accord, going towards net zero in the industry. And it's important to understand that blockchain is distinct from Bitcoin. Most of the enterprise systems that are installed don't have an additional energy requirement. They're sitting in the same data centers as the ERP systems and so on. So how did this evolve from proof of concept Bitcoin to what we have now? Well, we have this evolution from coins through programmable money to extraordinary crypto assets. And I'm talking about these because they're important in the context of supply chains. And actually, in the context of more than just supply chains, I'm working on a project at the moment, which is in a different aspect of business, which again is using crypto assets. So we started off with normal currency and then made that digital, made that a peer-to-peer currency. And because it is software, it can be programmed. So a coin can be programmed to behave in a particular way. All these coins, all they do is they pay for the transactions on the network. They're the bit of code that enacts a transaction. And they have all sorts of different functions. So there's some here that are designed for privacy, some that are designed for stability, some that are designed for the transmission of information. So, for instance, this oracle of information that is input into the blockchain so that you have verifiable sources. And this is what, for instance, the Chainlink looks at. And then we move on to programming not just individual coins, but programming individual unique assets. So these are actually assets that I own. They started off really in gaming, so with crypto kitties and also crypto punks. And we have artworks now that are also held on chain. That ownership is recorded on chain, giving digital assets the same kind of provenance and transparency of source as physical assets, and possibly better, in fact. So adoption of cryptocurrencies is growing. We have different types of currency, particularly. So decentralized cryptocurrencies, we tend to talk about money of the people. So this is things like Bitcoin, Ethereum, and so on. We have central bank digital currencies coming through. So even the Bank of England is currently consulting on having a digital public money that is tied to pound sterling. And we're also seeing money of the corporation. So tech companies are coming through with their own coins, which is slightly frightening for some of the larger economies. And we have a very big global impact. The most recent We Are Social sort of roundup of online behavior noted that 7% of adults worldwide own crypto, but that is skewed towards various economies. So the Philippines is possibly one of the biggest, which doesn't surprise me in the slightest, because there's an awful lot going on in the Philippines in terms of adoption of crypto, particularly during COVID. There are people who are keeping their families alive by playing blockchain games and earning crypto. And this is a kind of a message for people in large supply chains, that actually those tier 3, tier 4 suppliers may already be active in the blockchain and crypto ecosystem. So it's all very well imposing a new system, but actually people are already active. So there is already an element of adoption, which makes it more practical to start implementing these kind of technologies. And I mentioned the crypto assets and the way that tokenization allows that ownership to be traced. obviously, these kind of things grew up in gaming and in creative industries because there's an awful lot of investment in gaming because consumers are gaming. And there's a lot of payment going, there's a lot of money going through. We get a lot of innovation in different technologies through gaming. Artificial intelligence has gaming to thank for the improvement in graphics cards, which has driven the development of artificial intelligence and the improvement in processing. But here we have a particular effect from blockchain, from crypto assets. So this little artwork here is a very unique piece in a recognized body of work that is particularly popular at the moment. And it sold for $11.8 million just a few weeks ago. Around about the same amount of money as a Banksy had sold the previous month. So we have a decent trail of fine art being sold for this kind of money, popular art. And the tokenization of that asset meant that you could look back and say that was definitely created by that artist. It has gone through several hands in terms of ownership, and it can be provenanced and say this is the original. I could download a copy by right-clicking right now, but that's not the original. That's a print at best. Tim Berners-Lee is auctioning his original code from creating the World Wide Web in the same way. The archivists and curators are absolutely delighted because it means for the first time a born digital asset of real historical significance can be properly provenanced. Here's the original code with Tim Berners-Lee's signature on it, effectively in digital terms. So for something like artworks or that code, what they're doing there is protecting the intellectual property. And that protection of intellectual property filters through into business again in terms of protecting from counterfeits. And we have this unusual aspect as well around value creation. We see people trading assets or earning money through games and through the assets that are bought and sold in this kind of environment. But what about data that's collected through supply chains, through different applications? I think my data is valuable to people who wish to use it. I could see a data value chain being built up through this technology. I hope I'm not losing anybody. I've kind of digressed slightly on crypto assets because I really enjoy that aspect. So where has business taken this? Well, they've taken the concept of digital assets and they've applied the same qualities. They've applied those qualities to physical assets. They have digitally twinned physical assets. And these are examples of assets that have digital twins, that have token twins, NFTs, durian fruit, spaghetti squash, and high-end watches. Breitling watches are currently using NFTs as well to track the provenance of that watch and to guarantee that it's not counterfeit. And what we're able to do, which we can't necessarily do, or we haven't necessarily been able to do before with a lot of physical assets in a reliable way, is to attach details of every step of the way along the supply chain. With some squashes, I know that they are tracing from seed, getting the seeds across the border to the farm, watching the growing, getting the harvest details, and shipping those harvested squash out to the market so they can say, here is Japanese squash that was grown in Australia, is now being sold in Singapore. And you can trace that every step of the way down to where did the seeds come from and what was the condition of growing, which adds considerable value and transparency to the supply chain. And what you're also doing is capturing data. And that audit trail is not just valuable for the end seller. It's not just valuable for the middleman, for the auditor, for the producer. it's valuable for everybody. It gives consumers information on source and sustainability. I know that they're also using it for recipes and usage information and disposal advice, but it's providing an audit trail for anybody that engages with the parties in the supply chain. This is where it starts to get significant for us. So just a little reminder, what do consumers actually want? They're looking at waste reduction, carbon footprint, sustainable packaging, ethical working, respect for human rights, protection of biodiversity, and we're also looking for, what's the resale value of my Louis Vuitton handbag? Not that I've got one. that was purely speculative. Am I sure that that is not a counterfeit? How do I know how to wash this when I spill something on it? It's a high-end piece and I don't want to ruin it. So this is the kind of information consumers want. It's the kind of information that we're now able to give them. I'm going to have a look at 4 little case studies for current applications in very, very different areas where blockchain is being used, applied, and is being effective and is making a difference to business and consumers, but at all levels of the supply chain. I wasn't joking about the Louis Vuitton handbag. I'm very, very glad that the timing of this is perfect, because I've been watching the Aura project for a couple of years now, and it has literally now gone live. So this is Louis Vuitton, Prada and Cartier are working with their luxury blockchain system. And the aim for them is very much, I guess, tackling the counterfeits. So ensuring that people can be very, very confident in the authenticity of something that they buy. So at the consumer point of purchase, if you buy it direct from an outlet, brilliant, you know exactly where it's come from. If you buy it on a secondary market, you couldn't previously tell. Now you can see, because of that transfer of ownership that is recorded digitally, you can see that this is an original piece and it was produced on this date and it's gone through 1 owner or 2 owners or 3 owners before it's reached you. And the manufacturers can also see the progress of that secondary market. They can also cascade royalties if they wish from that. There's a very different application which is cascading royalties, and that's the BBC are working on Doctor Who gaming cards, Doctor Who Worlds Apart, and these can be followed through secondary markets as well, and royalties can come back down to the owner of the intellectual property, back down to the BBC. We have product history here on the Aura project, on the Aura system, going back through the materials sourcing. So a consumer can go back and check, where did that come from? Where were things sourced from? And they're also using this enhanced information to give handling and care information to their clients. So this is it's a wonderful, wonderful example of a really good implementation that has been considered over several years, because as I say, I've been following it for a wee while, and is now implemented. So I'm very much looking forward to seeing how that develops and the reports that come out from those brands. So same but different. This is our durian fruit. And they also do the spaghetti squash and the Japanese squash. So Dimuto is a company in Singapore, and their original proof of concept of their blockchain a couple of years ago, they followed 1.2 million durian fruit from the Thai harvest, and they followed them from literally the collation of durian from the different villages around a particular point, and it's sending off to wholesalers and onwards up the supply chain. And the impetus here was nothing to do with, can we guarantee that's a real durian from this village? Very, very different thing. It was a recognition that the farmers were really struggling to make ends meet. And there were 2 reasons for that. One was that if there was an insurance claim on the durian fruit and it arrived at the vendor and it was rotten, then the insurance burden was falling on the smaller players in the supply chain, all the way down to the producers, and wiping out their profit. And they needed some way to very simply show this is the condition of the fruit when we shipped it. This is the condition of the fruit when we got it and passed it on to you. So you can nail down exactly where the damage has been caused. And at the very simplest point, they literally took a picture of the fruit. And that was time-stamped and linked to, they had sensors to and GPS to ensure that they had the location and the timestamp and the photograph, and that was enough to start reducing those insurance claims. Really significant for them. They are doing all sorts of things now. They're working on five continents. Which is 5, I think it's 5. And they are things like using chemical analysis of the chemicals given off by an avocado to see what stage of ripeness it's at. So that can also be recorded as a feature of the avocado in that supply chain. So that was the first thing. They managed to reduce the insurance claims for the farmers, for the small businesses, and actually make sure that they made a profit. The second thing they managed to do is to then look at the trade finance gap, because a very, very small producer supplying a very, very large supply chain will not have the systems in place that the larger companies do. They can't dive into their ERP system and go, here is the audit trail of all of our supply. No, they are now able to rely upon the transaction history that is held on chain, so that somebody who is supplying trade finance can see the volume that has been supplied, the acceptance criteria, the money that's been paid, the price that's been paid, and so on. They are even now using it for factoring, so that the invoices themselves at acceptance are settled, which improves the cash flow, so that they're being paid within 2 or 3 days of acceptance of the goods, rather than 30, 60, 90 days. And they have that audit trail behind them to access that type of trade finance. And it is improving the growth prospects of the businesses, the very, very small businesses within the supply chain. And it is starting to close the gap of record keeping between, for instance, I think they were dealing at one point with flowers between Kenya and the Netherlands, and they said the difference between obviously between the systems in both sets of producers was extraordinary, and this is starting to close the gap. So that blockchain system is benefiting every party to it. Another one that I really love is Volvo, who have a very good reputation for their concern for the environment. And they wanted to be sure that this cascaded all the way down through their suppliers. And they put in their system with Circular, looking at the end-to-end compliance for conflict minerals, particularly cobalt, in the EV batteries for the Polestar range. And they have, when they published information on this last year, they said that they have traceability now for tier 3 and tier 4 suppliers. And they have actually disposed of suppliers and got new ones as a result, in order to manage that ethical human rights aspect of the sourcing. And Circular are actually working on other things around closed loop electronics recycling, so that we have a holistic approach to the whole life cycle of manufacturing. And we're able to evidence that through the ledger of record. And they're looking as well at sustainable agriculture provenance. So things like, has there been any deforestation here? No, the trees are still standing, and we can evidence that. We don't need to fly in expensive auditors to check. So there's an awful lot of good information around the sustainability piece. And if we think about the the management of a holistic project. This is a completely different industry. I'm sitting on Teesside at the moment. I'm about 10 miles away from where, on one side, there are oil rigs being built, and on the other side, oil rigs being dismantled. And there's about a 30-40 year cycle there between design and decommissioning. And local legend has it that there's a 36-inch pipe on one of the rigs in the decommissioning yard, and no one knows what's gone through it. So do they recycle it? Do they have to wear protective equipment? You know, what do they do? Are they going to lose the value, or is something just going to go to landfill? So local business Kraken, who are now working globally with infrastructure providers and large capital projects, have started to develop this document-led, this ledger of record for the design process, so that when you get to decommissioning, you can actually see where somebody has made a change to the design, maybe used a different material, and who's decided that, and when, and gives accountability for that decision making. What they're also doing now, which is fascinating, is they are starting to build the carbon footprint of the materials into costs, so that at the design stage, the data that can be built up from supply chain information held on a blockchain ledger is being used in the decision making for the type of materials that are going to be used in huge infrastructure projects that will improve the management of waste decommissioning and so on down the line. So there's a huge amount of really interesting stuff going on. What would a small business need to think about around blockchain? You're not going to be putting one in yourself, but you may benefit from the kind of things that the Demuto participants discovered at the very start of the supply chain. We have this option to use publicly available data on a blockchain to evidence for lending. We have protection against counterfeits, which benefits everybody. We have transparency on the acceptance criteria for goods and on payment. And things to think about, I think, are borderless payments using crypto, having a look at the tax implications, which I can talk the hind leg of a donkey about those, but I'm not going to today. And thinking about, if you make a decision, if you do something that is recorded on chain, that decision sticks. So we're already seeing changes in behavior where people are being far more rigorous about their decision-making processes, because they know that they're accountable for what goes onto that ledger. So the things that we ask for, is a blockchain appropriate? Is there an asset being moved along a supply chain, for instance? Are there multiple parties? Well, of course there are. Is trust and transparency things that will benefit producers, consumers, everybody in the chain? And are there any really complex, horrible pain points that need to be simplified? Because looking at a distributed ledger approach may solve that pain point. It won't all the time, but when it does, it's extraordinary. So that's really all I wanted to say around doing business on blockchain. We have plenty of time for questions, and I do not lose an opportunity to mention that I have several books around blockchain that are available on Amazon and on my website and various other places. So are there any questions?
Can I start off with one? Sounds a bit dim, probably, Kate. But
sure.
We're approached regularly with people who are looking at developing or launching new coins.
Oh boy.
And there's always the danger factor there. Is there yet to set up a recognised regulatory body that coins are going to be covered within. In other words, something that people like ourselves could research back to and see if this person is an affiliate or associated by that body.
Okay, so there are significant regulations. I'm just thinking, starting off with the UK, different jurisdictions have different regulations. So in the United Kingdom, if you are going to issue a coin, then there's a lot of hoops to jump through. It needs to be done as a token offering under the auspices of the FCA, and there will be a lot of examinations of whether something is a security or whether it has utility on a chain. So there's an awful lot of regulation around it. Shifts according to the jurisdiction. So America is very, very strict. The UK is kind of in between and well thought out. Europe, there's some really interesting regulations in Europe around defining what is a utility in the issue of a coin. So yes, there are a lot of regulations that have been put together to protect consumers for coins that are issued and available for public purchase.
Brilliant, thank you.
Okay, there's a few questions in the chat. I don't know.
Right. What I will do is I will stop the share so I can see the chat in a lot of detail. Yeah, excellent. How does the physical item get linked to the digital system? It is all about, right then, yes, it's based on labeling. So that was an interesting question. That was an interesting discussion I had with the guys who do the spaghetti squash. If the label disappears, what do you do? And they said, well, how do you put a label on a brassica? For goodness sake. So yes, if the label disappears, then the authenticity disappears. Yeah, I would say so. If you chip your cat and the chip disappears, then is it still your cat? The two questions there. Linking the physical item into the digital system is more than just the QR code. There are, if you take Demuto as an example, you have a lot of different pieces of data that go to define that asset. So in theory, I guess you could go back and check the individual asset and compare its attributes, would be one aspect. If there was an issue with the labeling. But yeah, there's lots of different types of labeling. There's lots of different ways of attaching things. This is where linking with Internet of Things comes important. So we're starting to use sensors, chips, very, very small identifiers. And I think that technology can only improve. Particularly as we start seeing things like the DNA chips and all sorts of stuff that are in the very, very early stages of innovation. So it kind of skirts the question nicely there, Peter. I'm sorry. And Aid, strong temptation to fiddle numbers. How do you know you're looking at a blockchain, not a database? Okay, if you are using any type of public blockchain, you can literally go to a browser of your choice and you can see the hashed transaction. So if you know exactly what you're looking for, then you can verify that a particular thing happened on a particular date. A really simple example, I was writing an article about a friend who is a crypto artist, and I wanted to check how much he'd actually, not how much he'd made, but how many pieces he'd sold and in what period of time. And I was able to just go straight through and see on the public blockchain that the pieces sold on these dates at this time for this amount of money. So that's not something that he has under his control, and it's not something that can be changed. So it's that independent verification that is really, really important. And you can do that with I know you can do that with the Demuto system and with others, and I suspect Aura as well.
So is this information, sorry, my camera appears to have stopped functioning. Is this information publicly and widely available?
Yes, but in a format that is indecipherable unless you have a way of interpreting it. So I don't really have time to fiddle around and share screens, and it would kind of lose the point, I think. But if I go, actually, I'll go back to here. Where's my little picture? There we go. I'll just share this screen again very quickly. So this is a screenshot from Etherscan. So I can go in and I can see, here is this latest transaction. And I can see the name of the transaction, the hash of the transaction, which is unique. And I can see the amount of ETH in at the current value that was involved in that transaction. But I can't see anything other than this string to represent the parties to the transaction. So unless I know exactly what I'm looking for, I couldn't identify one of my own transactions. And you can see the code behind the transaction process. Again, you kind of have to know what you're looking at. If you are accessing this information through software that is able to decrypt the information, it will show you this artwork, reference number X, little picture of it was sold to this person on this time, at this time. So there's two things going on. One is you can look in your platform and say, it says that this was shipped on this day. And if it is recorded on blockchain, you can click a link at that point generally, and it will take you to the public blockchain record, and you can match up the details of the time, the value, and so on. Or you can find that transaction hash and you can go and search for it. So it's independently verifiable, but the information that is in the public domain is encrypted. Does that answer the question adequately?
Yeah.
Good. There we go. What else have we got? I don't mind daft questions because it's such a new area that it's, I think. If
okay.
Yeah.
Here's one then. So the blockchain has a record of all the transactions. So as time gets on, it's going to get larger and larger and larger.
Yep.
So at some point, is it then going to become too large that it's going to be too consuming of energy and not efficient to use?
Because it's storing a lot of stuff, yeah.
Yeah.
So the things that are now happening is there's a lot of technology around what they call side chains. So you would have an independent, you have a kind of loop off the main, let's take Ethereum as an example. You have a little loop off the Ethereum chain, and you can record transactions on that. So you've got a small chain that is just yours, and then a summary change of state is the only thing that goes on to the main Ethereum chain. So you're significantly reducing what goes on the big public blockchain, but you still have a chain, an immutable distributed ledger that deals with just your little piece of transactions. So actually the Doctor Who example is one of those, where all of the faffing around with all the cards and the little marketplace that goes on internally is held on their own little system, and that would take exactly the same kind of processing power as a database that is sitting on multiple servers for redundancy, multiple data centers for redundancy. And then significant changes of state are recorded to the Ethereum blockchain. So it reduces the impact on that big superhighway of Ethereum, and you've got your own smaller chain.
Does that mean the smaller chain's more vulnerable then because it's smaller?
That's a really good question. And I'm sure it is one that people have addressed, but I have not asked them.
Okay.
Honest answer there.
There you go. Brilliant.
In terms of security, actually, in a blockchain, the issue is not how big the chain is. It is how many blocks were there since the thing that I want to fiddle And can I recast all of the subsequent blocks in time to catch up with the processing of the chain? And that's what keeps it secure, because if you change something 5 blocks ago and it takes you 10 minutes to change that block and that one and that one and that one and that one, and 5 more have been produced by then, you're never going to catch up. And that's what makes it unchangeable. Okay.
So as long as the velocity of it's going quite quickly, then it's going to be near impossible.
Yeah, and there are also mechanisms around randomizing that confirmation to make sure that it's not just me going, tell you what, Scott, I'll send you some money and then we'll just not confirm it, and then I'll send you it again and we can both spend it. So there are all sorts of clever ways of randomizing. I think one of my favorite ones from very early days is proof of elapsed time, where the transaction block sits there and goes, right, who's got a bit of processing time right now on their Intel chip, and it pings everything, all the nodes that are active on the network, and one of them goes, me, and that's how it randomizes the confirmation. It's very neat.
Okay, I see Peter's put a question in the chat.
How do you start blockchain mining? Is it worth it? How does it all work? Oh, okay. Depends on the chain. You need a house full of very expensive kit to mine Bitcoin. I'm not going to go there. All it means is that you have a copy of the ledger on your machine, and you so there's several different things. So if you were mining, you would be always trying, somebody described it like a game of hungry hippos, always trying to catch the next block and be able to shut it. And that's what the energy intensive mining is. In terms of the newer types of public blockchain are tending to run on proof of stake. And what you do with that, and I do this, is that you have some coins and you stake them in a pool, and the system will ping out and go, who's free, who's got the most coins right now? You can confirm this block, and then that is and there's you can earn money from staking, so you earn interest from staking. So mining is one thing, which is having a copy of the ledger and then frantically trying to solve an algorithm that enables you to close the block. And then staking is far more straightforward. So is it worth it? I like staking. It does wonderful things. Mining, I think mining is not worth it unless you happen to have a handy renewable source. Long answer, sorry.
So if you got solar panels on your roof, is that what you say?
Yeah, or a useful windmill.
Yeah,
they're probably the best 2 options for mining. Mining generally, I know we're going a little bit over time now, but mining generally, one of the challenges is that this game of hungry hippos is going on all of the time. I didn't use it. It was actually an environmental researcher that I know, a professor who came up with that one, and that's constant. But renewables are not constant. So there are things around going, how do you harness variable supply against constant demand, and how could you use stranded energy, because that's, it's been created, so you might as well use it for something. So those are the 2 things that people are looking at in terms of the greening of Bitcoin.
I got one quick one. Things to do in the immediate future. In other words, what we should be watching out for, and where should we be trying to invest?
Oh, I don't give investment advice at all.
Don't blame you.
Very scary. Look at the projects. Look at the kind of things that people are developing. There are some really very, very interesting pieces of tech that have been several years in development that are fascinating, and that's generally how I assess any investment that I put in. I don't invest heavily, and it's very much around look at the projects, look at what they are changing, what problems they are solving, and if they are solving real problems for real people, then there is utility that gives value to the project.
Brilliant. Well, do we have any final questions there for Kate? Can
a transaction be refunded or returned in a retail environment? Absolutely. You can't then. Yes, of course it can, because you are simply attaching information to the asset. So if I've got my Louis Vuitton handbag and I want to return, it simply says, this asset now has moved to here. It's simply another piece of data that's attached to the asset. And all of the refunds and so on would be dealt with by all of your normal systems. All this is a ledger sitting underneath.
Yep. Okay, all right. Well, we'll be coming up to our next workshop in about 10 minutes. So if there's no other questions in, I'd just like to, thank Kate for running this workshop, and thank you all for attending. If I have a quick look here, the next one I believe is in 10 minutes. And is it at 2, Jordan? Next one, Don't Sell Features and Benefits, Sell Certainty by Warren Cass. I'll quickly throw the link in the chat here if you all want to attend that show. But cool. Thank you very much, Kate.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, everybody. And please do reach out to me if you have any further questions. I am all over the place. If you should be able to find me. Fantastic. Thank you. Lovely to see you all.
Thank you.
See you later.
Thank you. Bye-bye.